All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk in depth about global variables. So variables that are created outside of a function are known as global variables. Global variables can be used by everyone, both inside of functions and outside. If you create a variable with the same name inside a function, this variable will be local and can only be used inside the function. The global variable with the same name will remain as it was, global and with the original value. Normally, when you create a variable inside a function, that variable is local and it can only be used inside that function. To create a global variable inside a function, you can use the global keyword. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're in our trusty variables notebook. So let's create a global variable. Okay? So let's do x equals awesome. Okay, and then let's comment this out for global variable. Okay, and then let's run a function. So let's do def my func and then colon here, and we're gonna do, and we'll do print Python is, and then a space for concatenation plus x, and let's call my function. Okay, and then let's run that and see what we get. Python is awesome. So you can see we created the global variable and then we can use it anywhere in our code, instead of limiting yourself to a local variable where you can only use it inside of the function. Okay, so create a variable inside a function with the same name as the global variable. Okay, so let's do that. So let's go back here. And let's do this example and see what it does when we create a variable inside with the same letter. So we'll use x equals fantastic. Okay, and then we're going to print Python is plus x. We'll call my function. And then let's call it outside print Python is plus x. Okay, and then run that and see what we get. Python is fantastic. Python is awesome. So you see what happened here. The global variable still works outside of the function, and inside of the function, the local variable works inside the function. Okay? So normally when you create a variable inside a function, that variable is local and can only be used inside that function. To create a global variable inside a function, you can use the global keyword. So what we would do is, instead of doing just this, because this makes it a local variable, x equals fantastic, what we're going to do is we're going to add the keyword global, and we're going to define the variable letter, okay? Because if I just do global instead of putting x in there and I run this, we're going to get an error, okay? But if I do global space x, then what we're going to get is what we had before. Python is fantastic. Python is fantastic. Because what happened? We turned this local variable into a global variable, so it can be used anywhere. So that's how you can work around that, and that's what I recommend doing if you're going to when you create variables. So here's a quick pro tip. When you're creating variables, make sure that you make them unique, and if your intention is to be able to use them anywhere in your code, always make global variables if you can, under that example. If it's just needed for the function, then just make a local variable. And remember, you can always change it to a global variable by just adding the keyword of global, which is a great tool and makes it extremely flexible to be able to do that with no problem. Okay? So again, this is an important thing to understand, because global and local variables are very important to understand, because they're all used for different things. But global variables are way better to use because you have way more flexibility and way more ability to use them all over the place than if you have a local variable. But again, if you have a local variable and you need to make it global, then all you have to do is global and then the letter, and you're good. But remember one thing, don't give them the same letter. Always Always, always. You'll notice in the examples that I've been doing throughout the course, I do A through Z for variables, right? So we do A equals, B equals, C equals. The reason why I do that is it's in alphabetical order, so it's easy to see the sequence. Like I'm going A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? So what you want to do when you're creating variables is come up with a system that works for you. It doesn't have to be in alphabetical order, but make sure that it makes sense to you and it fits your workflow so that when you're creating variables, you can quickly maneuver around. Because if you make 5 x's equal to whatever, but they're local, but then let's say, oh my gosh, I need to change x1, x2, x3 to something else and they need to be global, well, then you got to rewrite everything. But if you come up with a system that works for you and you do A through Z, let's say for an example, for variables, you have 26 variables. Then what that does is you don't have to rewrite anything, okay? Because when you're programming, you don't want to be redoing work that you don't need to be redoing. What you want to do is you want to create code that you can use over and over again. And that's why I say global variables are better to use than local. Even in a function, if it's global, it gives you more flexibility, okay? Because then if you ever need to use it outside of that function, you have that ability to pull it out and use it somewhere else. So again, I strongly recommend using global variables over local variables in most instances. There are a few instances where local variables make more sense than global. If you want it to be contained and you don't want people to use it, then you want to keep it local, okay? That's fine. So that's my rant about global variables and about local variables, okay? So to change the value of a global variable inside a function, refer to the variable by using the global keyword, which we just did, okay? So again, one last time, when you're labeling this and using these different letters, make sure that they make sense, okay? Make sure you do A equals awesome, B equals fantastic. That way, when you replace it, it's not the same letter. Because again, here's the other thing you want to remember. When you're coding, you want to write the code so that someone else could come in and continue on, okay? So let's say you wrote out a program or a website. I'll give you a great example. When I worked as a front-end web developer for 2.5 years, I was managing 176 websites. So what I did is I wasn't using Python, I was using front-end technology, but it works in this example from the standpoint that what I did is I created a template for the websites because they were all the same client base. So I built the framework and then I just built on top of that. So that's what you want to do with Python is you want to build code that you can reuse elsewhere. Build like a module. For this example, for Python, it would be a module. But for what I was doing is I was building a content management system so that I could easily update the code across all the different websites, okay? And basically what I did is I gave them variables and defined those variables, and it was the same across all 176 websites. So that when I went in, I knew exactly where to go, and there was no confusion, okay? If I would have made them all local, then it would have been different. And that makes it really hard to manage things, okay? So again, I highly recommend global variables. This is my wrap up for global variables. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.